Well, this is Intro to Blueprints. I'm Erica Penk, and this is a nice beginner level course. And Sharon, were you able to find the files on the drive? And I ended up downloading and extracting things to this directory. So for me, it's C users, Penke, documents, Unreal projects. And then mine is right in here. So you can either double click that if you already have the engine or browse to it from going through here.
Hold on, let me see what you just did. Yeah, I'm in the engine.
Okay. So if
You
you're
said
in the
browse
engine,
through it?
you could do File, Open Project, and then try to find Intro to Blueprints. And if it's not in the default location, you might have to do
I
Browse
did
to
get it
find
in.
it. Say again?
It's saying it's unable to open it. So hold on.
Okay.
Why is that?
And you have 4.25.3?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Just want to go back and check, find out what the heck is going on.
All right. And I'm not doing anything earth-shattering. I'm going to talk a little bit more and, kind of stall a little bit, let you get up to speed.
Yeah, go for it.
A little bit about me. I've been using Unreal since 2015 for a variety of different projects, whether it's VR or film, motion capture. And I started off as an athlete. I thought I wanted to be an animator, but I got involved in motion capture, and then the jobs I got, I kept doing technical artist things. So that's where I've been, and I really enjoyed that technical artist thing. And I also do some goofy voices, and I'm doing voice acting, and so I get to, wear some different hats. And sneak peek for what we're doing, I took the content examples project, which I will show you guys how to get later, right here. And I just took some things from there, and then I stuffed it inside a smaller project. So it's curated. I took a level and then made another one, and then I'm just messing with a lot of things. Instead of showing you a perfectly packaged, this is how you do this, this is how you do this. I'm showing you how to deal with some broken blueprints so that you don't panic. And so I've got some teleportation functionality. I've got a homework assignment because I don't think we'll get to this at the end, but if we get to it, great. And I would say what we're going to do is we will talk about, we'll explore the level. Hopefully everyone gets their project up and running. And then we'll talk about what a blueprint is, some coding examples. Let's see if there's anything earth-shattering in the chat. Okay. All right. Talk about some coding concepts, different blueprint types, UI, do some things in the blueprints, do some exercises, and try to keep the questions in the chat box so that Warren can focus on that. If there's something that's major, he'll interrupt me and say, hey, can you go over the blah, blah, blah. They want to see this part of that blueprint again, etc. And then we'll have some QA, and we'll get to a stopping point at about an hour. And if we have more QA, I'm willing to stick around, but I know some people, are not night owls and need to go to bed. So there's that. But yeah, I stay up. Okay, how are we doing on project setup? Yep. And I am recording this. The chat box will not be recorded, so before you leave, save the chat box, and if you want to save some of the content that you got. But I will be putting up a private YouTube link. Okay. All right, so I'm in the folder and I've got my viewport into my level in the middle. I'm going to see if I can hide my little, okay, I'm gonna move that maybe right there for now. Okay, so if I right click, drag, that's how I look around. And then navigation is you use the WASD keys. So if I do the right click and then I hit the W, and then if I just move my mouse around, if you don't remember any other navigation, just, you know, use your mouse. And I hope I'm not making you guys seasick, but there you go. And then let's say you accidentally get out here and you're having a hard time getting back, then maybe click on an object you're familiar with, hit F, and then it will move you to that location so you can get back on track in case something happens and you're a little bit not in the same spot as we are. So that's the viewport, the level. We've got the world outliner. It shows you the things in the level. Content browser shows you things that you could bring into the level. And then let me drag that out of the way. We've got details panels that change based on what you have selected up here. And a world settings panel, which we may not get to, but if you need it later, you can go to Window, World Settings, and that will add that. Okay. But in case you're not in this level, and the current level is posted in this top left corner in that tab, I'm going to double click on Maps and go and then double click on Intro to BPs. And if you were in another level, you can say don't save, that's fine, and it will load up. All right, Warren, are we good to move forward?
Yep, no new questions in the chat so far.
Okay, cool. Just wanted to stall as long as I could. Okay, move you back over here. So first thing, we're going to figure out what the Blueprint visual scripting system is. And it's visually node based. So you make these spaghetti code nodes. You don't have to write any C++ unless you want to, but within the Blueprint editor, which I could pull up, for instance, let me click on this little guy. And then, let's see. Yay, okay, now I won't be moving that around. Okay, so if I click on an object, I can either double click on this, and now you can see a blueprint. And I'm gonna dock that in that little tab right there. Okay, so here's spaghetti code, and then there's different tabs, and I'm jumping around for my slides, but in the event graph, there's nodes. And you use these nodes to make objects, to make functions, to create gameplay events. So in this BP battery example, if you look at the construction script, that is dynamically adding a static mesh. And let me actually show you that. So I like to use filters a lot. And let me type in battery in this search box. And then what I can do is I can scroll all the way up to the top. I can click on content, and then with the battery word in there, it brings in a selection, and then I can double click on that. And if I go to the construction script tab, this is what I'm talking about. It is dynamically making a static mesh. And if I go to the viewport, if I were to unconnect this by doing Alt click, okay, that disconnects. And then I think I would need to compile it. I don't want to break it, but anyway, that's something you can do there. And construction scripts, they happen without having to play the game. And we'll show a better example of this later. And then the event graph, it's got a function and it's moving the battery up and down. So we will see that in more detail later. And I was having a hard time figuring out, okay, where should I put this massive slide, block of text? Just maybe focus on the first couple of terms right here. So Blueprint Visual Scripting System, it's object-oriented. So that's why I decided to do a little definition of object-oriented. So Unreal uses objects, and if there's anything I want you to take away from this class is that the Unreal Engine is not built on one gymongous file of code. It handles all the things, and it's really big and takes forever to compile and run. No. What the Unreal Engine does is it has a bunch of blueprints. They each have a job. They know what that one job is. And this one over here, it knows what it does. And they don't know what the other one is doing unless you tell them to talk to each other. And then they are, different objects. And let's say this one is similar to this one, then this one might inherit from this one so that it gets similar functions and variables from this one instead of having to rewrite all of that. So it reduces redundancy, it's more efficient, and that is the logic behind how they made blueprints and how they work. Let's pause for questions. Let's see. So object-oriented, is that foreign to anyone? Okay, I'm going to assume, so foreign kind of, okay. All right, maybe this example will help. Let's pretend that we have a class. So a class is just, file of code, right? And we have a person class. It has a name and a birthday attribute. And it's accessible. Other blueprints can see it because it's public, not private. And that's another coding concept. And the person class has two children, a cook class and an assistant class. And the cook class and the assistant class, they inherit those name and birthday attributes, but they also add their own stuff. So the cook has a make food function, and the assistant has a go to the grocery store function because they don't have a cooking bone in their body. And then let's say this function, it can take in inputs. So maybe the cook could send over the recipe variable. And don't necessarily get hung up on the notation, but it was just easy to write the little symbols plus and minus for public and private. And these arrows indicate that there is an inheritance. So these child classes are inheriting from the parent class. Okay, how are we doing so far? Okay, see some head nods. All right. So these classes down here, they are children classes of the cook class. Now they inherit the make food function, but they could add their own functionality. So the executive chef probably is going to be checking if the meat is cooked properly, making sure that the sauces are spiced correctly, whereas the sous chef is going to be chopping vegetables and sauteing, and the baker is going to be making a cake. Now, they all have the make food function, but they are specialized. So this is just showing you how Unreal likes to think about its objects. And let me jump out of order, but I'll go over this again, but I'm going to pretend I'm making a blueprint class. I'm not, but I'm going to pretend that I am. And I hit the green add new button, blueprint class. Now notice how it's asking you to pick a parent class. So that's why I'm talking about these examples, because you could make an actor class, or it could be a child of the pawn class. And if you don't know what to do, just do the actor class. But that's where this discussion is going. So to make it a little bit more tangible, now, if there's only two things that you take away from the slide, all I care about is that you know that objects are the base class in Unreal, and that actors are below object class, and there's tons and tons of different different classes that descend from object, and an actor is anything that you can bring into a level. So this guy right here, that's an actor, that's an actor. So lights, static meshes, skeletal meshes that we can animate later. But I showed you how the class structure is. If you get further in gameplay and you actually need to understand that, you know, you have a game and a game has a pawn, and then a pawn can be controlled by a player controller, and that's probably too much information for this right now. But if you want to go into the deep dive, this information is here for you. So if you want to just think about the cooking analogy, that's fine. But any questions about these terms right here? It's a good time to pause and get questions answered, because that was a lot. That was a lot.
Erica, from what I saw, one thing that might be good to go over, that mentioned that it's going to be talked about later, but they were curious on how communication between parent and child classes are going to work. And if one class can talk to many.
Okay, so just a quick example. Jumping ahead, I'm going to open a level blueprint, which is one of the types of blueprints. So the level blueprint is something that's big picture, and it can access specific instances of something in the level. So it can grab an actual actor. So I'm doing right click and W. So I've got this battery right here. And then if I go, let's see, how can I, the little share screen thing is covering up my level blueprint. Let's open it up again. Okay. And then if I right click, it says, hey, do you want to reference this thing that you just clicked? And you click that, and then you get a direct reference. And then from there, you can call functions like the move up. And I did a right click to get this little window, and then I'm typing in move up down because I know that's a function that it has. And then also casting is another way that you can communicate between different blueprints, but we'll talk about that later. Is there anything else you want to add, Warren, to that?
No, I think it's good that you will cover casting later, and I think that'll answer the rest of the questions. But the direct connection that you made there, I think works.
And side note, this will never get executed unless you have an event or like a key input. Like if I do space bar again, or let's do backspace. If you do that, then it will get called. But I will go over how to do these connections much slower in a bit. So I'll just leave that there. Okay. But actor is something that you bring into the level. Inheritance is parent-child relationships. Object-oriented is each blueprint has its own job. It knows what that is, but it doesn't know what another thing is doing unless it actually is told to go talk to that other blueprint. And objects are like, you know, atoms. The formerly most basic thing in building blocks of matter, but it's not actually anymore. There's actually smaller subparticles. But anyway, there you go. And
So for this case in the object-oriented example
yes.
that you had just now with the person and the name and the birthday, is there any reason for the birthdays? I know it's just an example, but
yeah. I don't know, maybe the executive chef also has another function down here where they check to see what people's birthdays are, and if the current day is the birthday, then maybe the executive chef tells the baker to make a birthday cake instead of whatever they were going to make. So there you go. Okay, we are halfway in. So, okay, casting. Here we go. Let's actually talk about that. There, okay. Now, when blueprints want to talk to each other, you have to make sure that they have the right kind, because, maybe this blueprint has this function and we don't actually have that one. So it will throw an error if that's not correct. So I used to really struggle with casting, but this fishing analogy, I think maybe Alex Pascal said this one. But let's say you're fishing and you've captured something. So maybe you have a variable that's holding a blueprint that you think is the right class, but you're not sure. And you've captured something, but you don't know what it is until you actually reel it in. So casting is like that. You're checking to see if you actually have a fish, which might have a flop function, instead of having a tin can, which is an inanimate object, and that's not going to work. So in our examples, we'll use the casting node, and you say, hey, okay, cast to this specific blueprint class, and if the cast works, then do the proper functionality. But if it doesn't, then do a print string and say, okay, this is not actually what you thought it was. This is not the class you were looking for. But that's actually a really important concept. So any questions there?
Can you just blow up that image frame for a second so they can get a big look at that?
Let me actually go to it in the level intro so button casting valid. I love search. So casting valid. Did I not type that right? Casting valid. Casting? Aha. Okay. Let's try that one. Okay. So we've got when an object is overlapped, it calls this flip-flop function node thing. It's a node. And then you're turning on a light and you're trying to make sure that this target battery is actually a battery. And why the heck not? Let's just go to this example. So this one right here is what we're talking about. This is the same thing that we're looking at right here. And it has, if I go over to my details panel, a target battery variable that I could set. So if I set it by doing the little eyedropper and I click this guy right here, and then I hit play, but let me make sure that I play at the current camera location. So I'm going to hit play, because otherwise I would start way down there. So I'm going to hit this button. So on component overlap, the battery is over here. So what it did was, okay, we hit the trigger, and then this is going to flip-flop between the top stuff and the bottom stuff each time we hit it over and over again. And then we are going to, change the button material so it turns green or red. And then we're going to check if that target battery actually is a battery. And then if it is, then we're going to move it up and down. If it is not, then print this thing.
Is the flip-flop
So,
function like a randomizer function for testing?
say again?
Is the flip-flop function like a randomizer for testing?
Let's see. Let's do, I'm going all out of order, guys. This is fun. Okay, this is cool. All right, I'm going to do a live debugging thing right here. So I'm going to do BP battery button right here. I'm going to pull this out so we can actually see the flow while we hit play. And this is a little challenging with only one monitor, but try this. Maybe right there. I don't know. So I'll hit play and see if I can move this so you can see. Okay, so blink. Burp. Let's try that. So just watch how it goes either on A and then B and then A and then B. Burp. All right. You debug thingy. All right, I'll try a little bit more. And if that doesn't work, we'll just move on. Maybe I need to click on it first. Let's try that. All right. Well, what usually happens is there's these orange arrows right there, but I've got to move on for time's sake.
I'll go over flip-flop a little bit in the chat.
Okay, cool. All right. So where are we? Casting. All right. So it's 8:34. We got to move. So there's different blueprint types. There's the level blueprint and the blueprint class. And those are the most common, so we will focus our time on that. So I've already shown you the level blueprint here. And then if I go to another level, for instance, and if you guys don't have these filters right here, I use them a lot. You can add them. You can add the level thing, and then I can have this level selected. I can go up to content. I can clear my search query, and then it will take me to just these levels. So I can go to the example project welcome. No, I don't need to save. And then if I open the level blueprint, it's different, right? So that just shows that there's one level blueprint per level. Kind of makes sense. So now I'm back in intro to BPs again, and I have to open it up again because I'm switching between levels. And get my notes. Casting types, level blueprint, which is good for big picture functionality and accessing those actor instances, which we already did. And so we are on slide 16 if you are following along. Okay, so it's good for loading new levels. It's good for calling a level sequencer like a cutscene or something. You can do that from here. And if you're really fancy, you can do some event binding to actors, but that's a whole nother class. But there is a really cool map. If you go to the content examples project and download that later, there's a level design workflow map it just shows you how elegant that feature really is, but that's, neither here nor there. And then upon possession, let's say you've got a game and at first you're a human, but then you press a button and then you turn into a car or something. Then what this does is you can change which pawn you're actually driving in the game. And there's a lot more things you can do in level blueprint, but that's a couple main things for starters. And let's see, so we opened that. Let me show you some of the stuff I added. So here's the spacebar thing. We already talked about that. That is an event, an input keyboard event, and it triggers the animation of the battery. And we've got up here the menu. We've got the toolbar above here. The buttons I use the most in this toolbar are the compile button. So let's say I don't know, let's add a print string. So I did right click, I'm typing in print string, I'm hitting enter. Oops, sorry. I can hit compile, and then down here, you've got your compiler results. If it was successful, it'll tell you. If there were error messages, it will tell you down there. Save, hitting play, and then over here in the My Blueprint section, you've got variables and functions. These are things that you want to be easily accessible. And then the detail panel over here, let me minimize the changes based on what you have selected right there. Okay, bring you guys back. Okay. All right, menu toolbar, blueprint. Okay, so let me show you how to move around a bit in here. Right click drag. That allows you to pan back and forth. You can zoom out by doing the middle mouse scroll wheel. You can, let's say you zoomed in too far, you can hit the home button, and then that will frame everything in there. And in case you're madly scribbling these down, I've got a handy dandy slide at the very end, slide 24. It's got lots of hotkeys for you to review later. But let me go back. Okay, 17. Okay. And let's drag a variable out over here. So you can drag variables directly into the event graph, the spaghetti part. And then if you don't do anything but just click drag, it's going to wonder, do you want to get the variable? Do you want to set the variable? And notice the tooltip is saying, hey, if you control drag, it'll automatically get it. And then if you alt drag, it will automatically set it. So let's try it. I'm going to do a control, click, drag, and it doesn't matter which one, alt, click, drag. So this is just got your value. Let's move you guys over here. So this variable is a vector. It has 3 XYZ values. It's holding a location. But if you wanted to set it, it looks a little different. You could type it in, or maybe you have another variable that you want to plug it up to. This is just going to set it to be the exact same thing, but you could, drag that in there, or another vector variable like that. But I'm going to delete that. Okay, that was the control drag, alt drag. And then let's also practice. I'm just doing right click, drag, middle scroll, zoom in. If you guys can navigate to the My Player controller, I'll pause a little bit because I know I'm driving around a little bit. So if you're here at this My Player controller, a nifty way to move all these connections. So let me set up this example. I'm going to drag another My Player controller. I'm going to get it. And then if I do a control click, hover over this, blue dot. So hover over the blue dot, do a control click, it grabs all of those connections. And I know we're not doing a ton yet, but that is super useful. And instead of you having to manually rearrange all 4 of those, I mean, what if you had 20 connections right there, right? And then one more time, control click drag to put it back where it was. And then let's say you need to break all of those connections. Similar concept, I can do alt click, and then it breaks all of them. But I'm going to reconnect that. Okay. And while I'm here, Let me see. Any questions that need addressing?
Actually, yeah, I wouldn't have. Getting a variable automatically set it to the current camera location.
Getting a variable, setting it to the current camera location. Well, let's see. Let's try to figure that out. So it'll probably be similar to this section where, like, do they want the current camera section, current camera location right at the very beginning? Or does it matter? Or is it at any
No,
time you press a button?
actually, the question, I didn't really understand the difference between getting a variable and setting a variable.
Oh, okay. Getting a variable and setting a variable. Okay, so we've got our first world location, and okay, you know what we're going to do? We're going to make a new variable. We're going to call it, so I did this plus variable button right here, and I'm going to call it third world location. I hit enter, and by default, it's going to try and make it a Boolean, and it's not going to have a value. It says, please compile the blueprint. It's like, okay, I will compile, doink. So now I can actually change this. So I have a third world location. I need it to have 3 slots like these other ones, right? So I'm going to change the type to vector and compile. So now I could, from day 1, go ahead and type, it's at location 555. But, let's say the actor does something and then this location is supposed to be a different spot. Then you would want to set it so that it would actually change dynamically. If you wanted to do that, then you would do, the alt, click, drag, and, this is originally 555. Maybe someone hits a button and it changes it back to the whoops, sorry, wrong button, multitasking. So if I do control, click, drag, maybe this is the location we want it to be. Then what happens is print string, and then if I drag the output of the variable into the print string, it converts it from a bunch of numbers to a string. So let's just do the number 3. Right click 3. Okay. So here's our arbitrary example that we set up to explain this. I hit compile, and then I go over here and I hit 3. Okay, now that third variable that we made now has the location of the second location. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that
Okay.
makes more sense.
So that's the difference between getting and setting. And we did level blueprint UI. Let me make sure we covered all of that. So then the next biggest type of blueprint class is blueprint class. So you've got level blueprint and then you've got blueprint class. Move you over here. And so it can be something that has scripted behavior. It could be something that you have multiple instances of. So going back to this button example, it's in here multiple times. But you could also have a blueprint actor just because, you need it multiple times. So it doesn't have to have scripted code is what I'm trying to say. But oftentimes it is both. So it's a visual element. It's also a code thing. So if I go in here and you can you've got it selected in your world outliner, you can do the edit blueprint button like that, open blueprint editor. That's one way. Or you can do a fancy thing where you do control B and it will find it in the content browser I might have already said that, but I use it a lot. And then double click on it. So different ways to get to it. Biggest difference in UI is you've got a components tab, and you may or may not have something in here. And you've got the construction script, like I was talking about earlier. So it has edits in editor, whereas event graph is once you hit play. And let me check my notes. So blueprints are saved in the content browser. And let's go over making a new blueprint class. And it doesn't really matter where. Let's go to the blueprints folder, maybe. And then I'm going to right click in here, add blueprint class, or you could do the green button, blueprint class, either way. And I've already showed you this, but let's do the actor for the parent class. And then I'm just going to call it BP underscore test. Okay. And here's our UI again. So let's practice adding a static mesh. So I can go up to the add component, static mesh, and there's nothing there yet. Kind of boring. But what I can do is over in the details section on the right, I don't know, maybe I'll add a rocket. That sounds cool. So I type that in, and it's huge. So I'm middle mouse scroll wheeling back out, so I'm not on top of the rocket. And we've added a static mesh component. And like the variables, you can drag them into the event graph. So you can drag it into the spaghetti land, just like you can do that with any variables if we had them. Let's see. Let's do yet another print string. Let's do, maybe on event begin play. So at the very, 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 very beginning of the game, first thing, how about you do a print string? And I'm going to move that. I'm just clicking and moving that. I'm going to connect that. So I'm just doing a left click drag from these little white things. And then I'm going to move that over, and I'm going to, let's just see if it'll let me pipe it in here. So what it's doing in order to turn this static mesh into a string is it's getting the display name. It's going to print that. And then another really good hotkey is if you marquee drag over these guys, you can move them up. And then if I hit C, I can add a comment. New print functionality. Okay. And then I'm going to compile and save. Now, if I hit play, nothing new is going to happen because I have to add it to the level, right? So if I drag it in, this is only part of it, but bear with me. All right. So now, and let me do that one more time so you can see the text. BP test 2 static mesh, blah, 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 blah. It printed something. It did a thing. Congratulations. Maybe that was your first blueprint. And a pro tip, if you're having a hard time getting an object to line up to be flat with the floor, you can just drag it up and then hit end. And what it does is it brings that little gizmo down to the floor, but I'm going to do that. So anyway, there's a rocket, and I'm going to delete that. We don't need it. But let's see, where are we? Blueprint UI. I'm going to skip data only blueprints for now, but it shows you how you can view them. So we started about 5 after, so let me run through these exercises quickly, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So I'm looking at blueprints and construction scripts. If you click on both of these blueprints right here, you'll notice that the second one, it has a stand color, whereas this first one does not. I don't have any ability to edit the color from within the editor. So this is construction script land. So I just changed that color of the one on the right, but I'm going to hit cancel. So if you're following along, you can either try and type in room description 12, or you can navigate here and click on this one. And let's go into the blueprint. And this is open mic, guys, so you can unmute. Now notice, we have the stand color variable, but what do you think we need to change about the variable so that we'll actually be able to see it in the editor over here? And you can try something and hit compile and see what happens. And it's called room description 12. So if you want to click, like let's say you're way over here, you just click on that, hit F, and then you'll be right there.
Would it hurt to do like one more mini example for everyone of just, a blueprint that,
Let's see.
has a light color or something, just so they can see it visually all the time?
Right. Okay. I'm going to go back to our abstract example. And remember how some of these, actually almost all of these variables were public, but the secret stuff, or the secret sauce variable, that one was something that only the executive chief could see. So for instance, can anyone tell me if this is a public or a private variable?
Private?
Oh, yeah, in the description there, this is not public.
So this says the variable is not public, but maybe we'll click on this one. So room description 8, click on that one. This one is public, and it is editable on each instance of this blueprint. And if you click on the variable, another way you can tell if something is public or private, I don't know why they gave you two different ways to change the same thing, but instance editable is another term for public versus private. Hey, look, there's the little wires I was trying to show you. So if we add a flip-flop node, will it let me do that without it breaking?
Sure should.
Print string thing 1.
The little I is like public and private, right?
Yes, you got it.
I is
And thing 2, okay. So it should flip-flop between. Oh, you know what? This is in the construction script. It's only called once, so it's not ever going to get, it's never going to alternate between these two things. But there you go. So eyeball is public versus private. Thing 1. Let's escape. All right, this one you can play with on your own, but it just shows you some really cool construction script stuff. I mean, I'm not playing the editor, but it's dynamically adding static meshes and, affecting the orientation. I'm just clicking on that endpoint right there. So that's some cool stuff. If you click on that, I mean, just look at all that code doing all the cool things. So construction scripts are very powerful. They should not be overlooked. And then this guy right here shows you, if I double click on that you could either, add static meshes in the viewport, or you could do it dynamically via construction script. So if I go in here, then it says, hey, if this condition is true, then add the billboard component. But if you look at this over here, there's no static mesh things or billboard components. It's being handled in the construction script. Okay. And then you guys are familiar with this one. I'm hitting play, doing spacebar, it goes up and down. And then remind me, did I show you the view options? Did I show you this yet?
No.
Was that a yes or no?
I don't think so.
Okay, cool. So this is asking you what type of blueprint is the child battery. Okay, child battery, what kind of blueprint is it? So I'm going to do Control B, and I'm going to do view options down here in the content browser and go to columns. And then we're looking for, I think, yeah, big child right here. So I'm looking for this name right here. Who can tell me what kind of blueprint it is? Is it a level blueprint? Is it a data only blueprint? Is it a it's definitely a blueprint, but which one?
I think on the is data only, there's the false and true information too.
Very good. Okay, so this one is data only. Whereas this one, the BP battery, it is not a data only, it's just a regular blueprint class. And then you can also figure out which one is the parent class, things like that. Does it inherit from actor, or does it inherit from the BP actor? So it's got some cool stuff in there. And just to show you the data only one again, or maybe I skipped over it, but notice how there's no spaghetti code. So that's the data only one. You can add it and convert it if you want, or not. Okay. Let's see here. Now let me just show you the most thorough example, because we were talking about casting and doing is valid checks. So casting is checking to see, okay, is it actually a battery? So this button, it has a variable, it's looking for a battery, but if I forget to set it, then it's not valid. So I'm gonna close a bunch of these tabs because I have too many open. And let me get some of your lovely faces back up there. Doink, cool. Okay, so this is now open. So this was trying to see if it was actually a battery. And then the is valid check right here is trying to make sure that we actually have something in the variable to begin with, not just is it the right thing. So it's most thorough to do both checks because there's just plenty of ways to go wrong. Whereas this one shows, okay, I have something selected, but it's not the right type of class. It's a static mesh actor. It's not a battery. So I called it battery wannabe. And then this one's battery wannabe 2. So this one had both problems, and it caught both of them. And then over here, last one, and I'm sorry I'm having to go through these super quickly today, but you've got these project files. You can go through at your own pace, and I'll answer questions anytime between now and next week. And then this one, we're going to try the flow control thing again. So let's get this tab, pull it out, and this is why having multiple monitors is beneficial. Let's hit play. Hey, we've got orange stuff, you guys. Okay, so it's telling you the execution order, and then if we right click, zoom in here, it counts, okay, how many sparks, and it's iterating. It's like, okay, it's doing 1 spark, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then once it gets to 5, it stops. So let's see if I can get it to, and then I'm gonna do Alt P. Yay, okay. Do that one more time. And I'm hitting escape because I want to change some of the variables to change the flow. So I'm in the details. So what happens if I change that branch condition? It changed the color. And if I hit Alt P to play, okay, it goes down here. And then the biggest visual change to show you guys is, let's say I add some vertical movement, and then I do Alt P. Okay, so it changes, and it actually goes to either this vertical section or the horizontal section. Okay, we are definitely ready for Q&A time. But let me give you your homework assignment too, if you choose to accept it. So what I was doing was, I first, let me clean these up. Delete and delete. Okay. Is I was trying to figure out, okay, how do I do this teleportation functionality? Because when I do play from the default player start, I hit play, I'm over here. This is the original level. So I can back out and show you that. Woo. Okay. But if I hit 2, then I'm over in the sandbox world. But if I hit 1, you're in the original world. Homework would be to try and figure out how to recreate this functionality. So, like maybe you have a button press, you try to see if your player controller has the right functionality. Now, player controller, let me go ahead and give you a little bit of background, is if I go to the world settings, your player controller is what's, moving around. So you need to grab it to do the teleportation. And normally you can just drag something in and then do the right click thing in order to get a direct reference. But for whatever reason, the player that's moving around, you don't have that luxury. You actually have to, at the beginning of gameplay, you have to grab it and stuff it into a variable. So that is something that's beyond the intro to Blueprints class, but it was something that I struggled with for a long time. So I wanted to share that, and we have, a good week to answer any questions about that. But I don't want to eat into the Q&A time, but this was just my first pass, and what I ended up doing is something that called a function from the player controller blueprint. So this is now object oriented, whereas this was all in the one blueprint, which was back to the big code where it had everything. Whereas this one's, it's just calling a function from another blueprint that has the one thing that it knows to do. and then it sets the world and it handles the teleportation. But I'm going to stop talking now. Okay. See you, Carol. Glad you could join.
I think on my end, I'll just have to kind of let it sink in first before I have more questions.
Yeah. This is one of those presentations where I give you lots of information in case you want to do the deep dive. I mean, just look at all the links on the bottom. And there's so many resources out there. I mean, there's free online classes here. You can Google things. There's the the documentation. I guess someone interrupt me if they have a question. But if you're having a hard time figuring out how to do something, there's really no easy way around the learning process for all of these different nodes. I mean, look at all the different nodes, and this is just for like I've got my player controller and I want to drag something off. This is just showing me the different nodes that make sense for the player controller. If I unclick this, then these are the nodes, all of the nodes that you can choose from, all of the nodes. And until you get familiar with what's out there, I would pay attention to the different categories. So there's tons of, like, let's figure, okay, where's casting? So there is, if I scroll up some more and some more. Okay, there's a casting category underneath the utilities category. And I don't know, maybe, there's things underneath. There's got to be a math category, right? Anyway, so whenever you're following tutorials, when you have a node that you use, pay attention to what category it is under so that maybe you can just explore that category in the future. Yeah, need to process. Yes, I understand.
I actually had a question. I'm just curious, since I don't know everybody here, I don't know what the primary use cases would be for what people want to use it for. Is it, coming from an artist standpoint where you're just trying to make scenes and create your own little backdrops, or is it coming from programmer standpoint where you want to put a lot of logic in place for what you're trying to make game projects or whatever?
Well, it would be an artist background type of thing. It would be nice to see if I can get some interactive models working in Unreal for display purposes.
Gotcha.
Mine's is definitely more in the virtual production. Because Jeff, my boyfriend, is doing VR stuff as well too. So he has more of the background, and then I just look over his shoulder and go, "What's going on?" So it's great to have that knowledge to take a look. And mine's is more on the delegation side. So I would at least like to know the basics of, like, if I hire somebody or if I'm working on a bigger project, what the basics are.
Understood.
Yeah, I know Asha is trying to get into graphics, motion graphics.
Yeah, and I've been learning new softwares, and now I just feel like Unreal has such big can dive into like a lot of different things, and my interest in lighting and texturing also is like something new that I can learn, and I've been dealing with Maya a lot more, so this is a new opportunity for me to learn a different software and then see where that takes me.
Yeah, I think the sequencer might be cool for you because, instead of doing cut scenes, it could be a logo graphic animation or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Asha's been working with me on some of the different projects too. So she's been doing Cinema 4D now. So it's definitely a big plus to be able to do like real-time rendering.
Oh, for sure. and Unreal's added a lot of tools for importing assets directly from Cinema into Sequencer. So that'll become very useful to you.
Yeah. First need to understand a little bit on what I'm looking and what I'm doing, just to get that first, and then dive into a little bit more in depth. That'll be good.
And there's so many different online learning classes. I mean, I'm not a very good salesman for showing you this, but I mean, it's not interactive, but there's just so much free stuff out there, and yeah, it'll help you get a leg up.
I think one of the other things I'm super interested right now is open source softwares like Blender and the whole pipeline as well too. So I think like with the fact that you can use Unreal to learn different things first, the accessibility is higher. So that's also something we're trying to push as well at ASIFA.
Yeah, it's amazing how much money has been pumped into Blender these days. And, Warren has been doing some pretty cool stuff with the Weather Channel. If you have any questions you want to specifically ask him, I mean, he's here. So there's that too. Double check if there's anything else.
Yeah, how's that pipeline, Warren? I'm sorry, I'm just kidding.
I'll let you know once I've figured it all out. Every day is new in terms of virtual production. So we kind of use a mix of everything, but definitely, everybody who comes from, a traditional animation or film background, a lot of that knowledge still applies to it when you're operating shows. And then for my job specifically as a tech artist, coming from a programming background definitely helps for logic and blueprint. So yeah, it's every day at the Weather Channel is a different puzzle.
So I think, yeah, I saw your survey for feedback as well too. I'll fill that up. But I think one of the feedback I definitely have, because we were doing similar things about ZBrush for ASIFA, is downloading the mouse click stuff so that it highlights when you're mousing over things, and also when you're typing, it'll show like Shift plus. So
Okay.
there's actually an open source one. I'll write it down in the survey later.
Perfect. Yeah, otherwise I'm, right click W or left click drag. I have a question for Warren. When I was doing this, getting the player controller, I was trying to figure out, okay, do I get the pawn? Do I get the character? Do I get the controller? Um, the reason I did it this way is because I looked, okay, my default pawn class is player controller, so I'll just get the first pawn and then make sure that it's the thing that it should be, and then stuff it inside of a variable. But I think some of the other ones worked as well. So how do you know which one to use?
If anytime is that player index 0, you can get anything along that same stream because it's still connected to that controller, so they're effectively getting the same thing. So any of them would work fine.
Okay, that's good to know.
What are some of the common mistakes, that you might see when people are doing blueprinting, like as beginners?
Like Erica hinted on this one during the presentation, but the thing I see the most common is just bad references. So say you have a piece of logic, like you're making a Unreal car that's a blueprint and has all this car logic in it. And one of the things in the car might be like you have, an engine component that controls speed and whatever you want to it. Sometimes people are in the car blueprint and try to control speed, but they're not referencing that specific car's engine blueprint, if that makes sense. So you can get out of place a lot by just not having correct references when you're trying to control something.
I know vectors sometimes are a struggle. I like it's really easy to start creating spaghetti code, but it's harder to actually think about, okay, is what I'm doing the most straightforward way, or do other people know what I'm doing? is it commented well? And then if this functionality becomes more complex, is it scalable? So, I mean, going back to this example, I did it. It works just the same as this other section, but it's this is having to be called over and over and over again, and it's more nodes, whereas this is much cleaner. And I mean, I would definitely say, okay, figure out how to do it first of all, get it down, pen and paper, so to speak, but then you can go back and think about how to do it more efficiently by putting something inside of a function in another blueprint. So I commented this, and this is what I added. I'm just changing the location and doing the print string, and I'm letting it handle it versus, come back here, doing all of that in the level blueprint, when really the level blueprint should be telling other things to do things. It shouldn't be handling everything.